Hey everybody, it's Rajesh here.
Intane here.
Welcome to our podcast, Baskets of Knowledge, Chats with a Difference. In our podcast, we invite guests from around the country and around the world to talk about how they got to where they're at the moment. It's about a journey, it's about an experience, it's about their life. Kia ora koutou, everybody. Welcome to another episode of Baskets of Knowledge. It's just me tonight and our guest we'll introduce in a second. So over the last week, what have I done is in my basket, I put in this quote here that curiosity is the antidote to fear. And this is something that I learned from a friend of mine, because a lot of us fear lots of things and it stops us from doing anything. But if you change the word fear to being curious, it's going to help you get over that fear, or if the fear is actually real or not. So that is one thing that I learned over the last week, and I would invite you, as you listen to the podcast, to think about how in your life can you be more curious in areas that you face or think about fear. And today I chose that one there because my guest today is someone that I think has been very curious in their life. I don't know if there's fear, but lots of curiosity to get to where they are, and I'm curious about their life as well. But it's someone that I have had the privilege and real honor of knowing or meeting a very long time ago, and it's a real awesome full circle moment to have them on the podcast, because they've done some really cool things in their life. And it is our honor and our privilege to welcome to the podcast Baraa. Kia ora, Baraa, welcome.
Kia ora, thanks for having me.
Baraa, for anyone who knows nothing about you, who is Baraa today on what is the date today? On Thursday, the 14th of May.
Yeah, first and foremost, I'm a medical student, I suppose. I study medicine at the University of Auckland. I'm 5 years in, and I love my fitness. I love reading. I love just learning more. I'm just a very curious person, and I think that's why your quote definitely resonates with me. And it's just, I'm basically on here, and I know that I have a limited amount of time on this planet, and I want to learn as much as I can from every aspect. So whether it be physics, cars, you name it, sports, whatever it may be, I'm definitely interested to hear about it and talk about it. So yeah, I'm very, very excited to be here.
And I love that, because, if we reflect back and think about you when I first met you as a year 12 all those years ago, and if I said to you, hey, Baraa, in 7 or 8 years' time, you're going to be in 50 med school, you're going to be curious, you're going to be doing all this awesome things that you're doing, what would you have said to me as a year 12?
I definitely wouldn't have believed you, because I'm not sure if you recall, but in year 12, I was a very different person. I was very sedentary. I was not very proactive with my life. Not active physically, but also not proactive mentally or trying to challenge myself. I was living a very comfortable lifestyle, and which was causing me a lot of discomfort, funnily enough, and I'm sure a lot of people might relate to that. And so if you told me that I'd be where I am today, I definitely wouldn't have believed you. And it honestly feels like I'm a different person meeting you now than when I met you in year 12. And yeah, it's a great full circle moment, like you said.
Yeah, and that's evolution, right? Or revolution, transformation, revolution, whatever you want to call it. And I'd love to know, was there a particular moment in time that got you to shift and change from the Baraa that was to where you are right now?
There's a few that come to mind. If we're going in chronological order, I suppose it was first, I was very blessed to have a lot of high achievers around me. All of my closest friends were the people who were top of my school, top of my classes. I was never on that same stage with them, but being in that circle always made me strive to push better and do better each time. And yeah, that was the first part where I realized, I don't have to stay where I am now. I can actually get to the same level as them. And if I pick up their habits, if I do the same things they do, then surely the results will follow. And they did. There are also a few other moments where I've known since a young age that I wanted to do medicine. And I remember talking to my high school teacher about this, saying, when he asked me, what do you want to do after school? And I said, oh, I'd like to go to medical school. And bless his soul, he was a really nice guy, but he was also a very honest guy. And he told me, look, I know this is your dream. It's a lot of people's dreams, but it's a very challenging field. And I'd recommend you have a backup plan. And I know he said it with the best of intentions, but him telling me that I needed a backup plan for my dream because there's a strong chance that I wouldn't make it just really flicked something in me. Then it just made me think, okay, well, I know I can do it and I want to do it. So what can I do to make it happen? And it sort of was that overnight switch where I all of a sudden just, and I honestly I'm not exaggerating when I say overnight, but I really woke up and I lost interest in a lot of the bad habits that I was doing. I lost interest in bad, like sitting on my phone, watching videos all day, playing games, all that stuff. It brought no joy to me. And all I wanted to do was start building towards my dreams, whatever category it might be. And yeah, one step after another, here I am today.
And you know what's cool about that, Deborah? Thank you for sharing. Is number one is the proximity that you had. You know, as you said before, your friends were high achievers around you, and I believe this, that the people around you determine your life, and you know whether it's high achievers or low achievers, if we want to call them that, whatever the definition is, they will drag you or they will lift you up in whichever angle
Mhm.
that is. So it's pretty awesome that you had that. But also the second thing is the switch, because and I hear this with a lot of people that when somebody doubts them, the doubt goes two ways. They either believe the doubt or they doubt the doubt, and they go, actually, why are you
Mhm.
saying that there? And I think that's what happened for you, which is really, really epic to see. And as you think about your transition, I know it's been challenging. I know you were living in Taranaki and you moved up to Auckland, and that first year I know was pretty crazy for you. Do you want to share how that first year was for you personally?
Yeah. First year was very difficult. Everyone who's gone through medical school, you can ask a surgeon, you can ask anyone, what's the hardest point of your career, and they'll tell you was getting into medical school. It's a well-established thing. That year is very competitive. You're competing with approximately 2,000 other students for 200 or so spots. So really was the top 10% that get in. And on top of that, there were other challenges in my life, personal challenges, family challenges. For example, during my exam periods in the first semester, I've had some family members that were hospitalized, and my choice was, do I go visit them in hospital or do I keep studying for my test? And I obviously communicated with them and said that I'd like to just focus on this for now. And I look back on this and think that thankfully they're fine, but I think back to that time in terms of if something had happened to them, I would have regretted that for the rest of my life. So there were a lot of hard decisions that I had to make in that year. And that's just outside of the academic stress itself. You know, when you're coming in there as fresh out of high school, NCA doesn't really prepare you that well. I don't know how many of the people listening to this podcast go through NCA, but you could get through NCA without studying, and you'll think you're the man. You know, you'd think I'm the best at this. I don't need to study, and you get to university and realize there are levels to this because if you don't study, I was studying from 5 a.m. to 9 p.m. every single day. This is not the way to do it, but it's because I didn't know how to study. I had no tools. I basically was just working from scratch and just needed to put in so many more hours than everyone else to get the same results. And since then, I've obviously adapted and adjusted my ways, and now it comes to me a lot more naturally. But that transition was really hard on so many levels, is what I'm trying to emphasize, because you needed to be in a space where you're capable of focusing on the work in front of you. And you also needed to know how to tackle the work in front of you. It's a big mountain. From the very start of the year to the end, you are always trying to climb this mountain. And some people will have better equipment, some people will have better gear, and they'll climb it easier than you. But at the end of the day, it's you and that mountain. So it didn't matter what other people were doing. Yeah.
And that's such a great analogy because if we think about all aspects in life, not just medical school, every single day we wake up in the morning and we'll have our own mountain to climb,
Mm.
and it's on us whether we have the right gear or whether we go and find the right gear. Which is a really beautiful analogy. And sometimes the gear we carry is the wrong gear, like you said before.
Yeah.
You have the NCA method of studying. Is that the wrong gear? And am I caught up so much that I don't want to drop it, or
Mm.
am I going to drop it off? And that's an awareness piece that is really, really,
Yeah.
really challenging.
Mm.
And the other thing that I want to touch on is you were living in Auckland as well. So you came from a small rural Taranaki, I guess. I'm going
Yeah.
to say
Yeah.
rural. Living in Auckland, what were those challenges like for you as well? Because you've got the academic side, but you've got this whole city, which is very different.
Yeah. Yeah. New Plymouth is a small town, and we often joke and say that it's, two or three streets, and that's the whole town in itself. And you compare that to Auckland, which is the busiest city in New Zealand, arguably, and it's got its skyscrapers, it's got all of these things. So it was definitely a big shift to change from that environment to the other one. And I guess the other thing is you move away, and not many of my friends came to Auckland University from my high school. I think I knew one other person who I was very close with that I moved up with, but other than that, and he was studying engineering, so it wasn't like I had a very strong support system up there. It was just me on my own, basically. But I'm lucky because I've moved schools a lot when I was a kid, which at the time was a huge struggle, but it really gave me the skills to be a people person and get to know people and just meet people really easily. And that worked in my favor because I managed to make the right friends again when I was in my first year and people who motivated me to study and who I motivated to study. And we sort of just bounced off each other and it was sort of us against the world, if you want. And yeah, so as hard as the transition was, I sort of worked to my strengths and found ways to adapt.
And I'm just gonna fast forward a little bit. You grind through the year, you do the study, you're climbing the mountain. What is it the day like? The day you got the email or the letter that goes, "Hey, you're in medical school." What is that feeling like?
Even thinking about it just puts a smile on my face. I was sitting at home and it was just a classic summer day. Actually, the medical school offers were meant to come out 2 weeks after they came out. So it was an early email that I got saying the results are out. And I remember rushing to check the portal and I was so stressed, but all of that stress went away as soon as I opened the email and saw that I was accepted. I actually was in disbelief. My heart rate was racing for pretty much the rest of the day. My dad was home. I remember running to him and telling him and seeing the smile on his face. It was like, all his hard work had paid off in that one moment. And I'm sure he would have been proud of me regardless of what happened. But, you know, coming from a family moving from Gaza to New Zealand, it felt like we started from scratch again and it was a way of for my dad to it was the biggest blessing he could have asked for. My parents were praying for this all day and night. It's not that they pushed me to it, but they knew it was my dream. And yeah, it was a big blessing to me and my family.
Yeah, and for our listeners out there, I know Bara's family. I had the privilege of meeting his parents, and I can just imagine how proud they were of that moment there. But I want to touch on something that you just raised now. You're in Auckland, you're in New Zealand, but your roots and your heritage are in Gaza, in a place that's so front of mind for a lot of people right now. And what is that like for you? We talk about academic success, but you're still a human being that is navigating a world where you see the news. You have family. I know you had a sister over there, and
Mm.
what is that part of your life like?
Yeah, it fluctuates. It's some days it's stronger, the feelings are stronger than others, and other days you sort of have to suppress it to be able to function. And I remember for the longest time, I hated the fact that we moved to New Zealand, and it was the time where I was struggling with the language, I was struggling with, the curriculum and everything. And that was the time when I realized I was doing so well back home. I wish I was still home. And it's bizarre to think about that now because, our house went on to get bombed. I've lost quite a bit of family members. We've lost pretty much everything back home. So it was a blessing in disguise to move when we did. But in terms of the feelings back home, there's a very common misconception that the war only started, after October 7th or whatever. But really, it's been there since I was growing up. We grew up without power. We grew up without water. Was very limited access to all these things, and that was the life we knew. And so hearing about it in the news and things, it's in a way it's bittersweet because you're glad it's getting some recognition, but at the same time you realize that it's very short-lived and people only care about it for however many months it's on the TV. But as soon as it's gone, people stop thinking about it. There's a bit more of a lingering impact that it's had now, and I think that's thanks to social media and the content we're able to share and the people, spreading the message. So that's been nice to see, and a lot of support for Gaza, which is good to see. But yeah, it's hard. At the same time, I've had a lot of people who want to discuss it with me, and I sort of was always taught to just keep my views to myself. I don't really talk about politics. I don't really talk about, even though it's my home country, it was a weird thing that I had to learn very early on is like, doesn't matter who it is, how close it is to you. Sometimes putting your head down and doing your work is the best thing you can do for yourself. Because if you get out there and you say all these things and you get backlash from the media, from people around you, from everything, then what did you achieve? Because you're not going to free your country by putting yourself out there. And while you're at the very lowest of the ranks, it's better to climb the ranks, get to a position where you can actually do something about it by advocating for it. And that's sort of the perspective I took. So getting back to your question, how did it sit with me? It took a long time to come to terms with the fact that I had to have my own views, keep them to myself, and all I could do was be grateful for where I am today on this side of the world than back home. And whatever was in my control, I would do, but most of it wasn't. So I had to just learn to focus on my day to day.
And that's such a powerful perspective, and I share this with a lot of people as well. Yes, we try and do what is supposed to be right, but as you said, sometimes you can only control what you can control. In fact, all the time, not sometimes, all the time, you can only control what you can
Yeah.
control. And you saying stuff and doing things, is it helping or hindering? And who is it helping or hindering? And I'm not saying that people shouldn't do things, but you got to think about what is the purpose of me doing X, Y, Z, and what can I do that could be different in my control. And I love the perspective that you have shared, especially for someone who's so close to Gaza, to Palestine. It's your world, but you've chosen, actually, I'm just going to do what I need to do right now and
Mm.
focus on that there. Yeah. And I guess, I'm going to ask you the question that you said before. Gaza to New Zealand. What is that like for you as a young person? And how old were you when you came over?
I came to New Zealand I was supposed to be year seven, but because of moving countries and I was doing well academically in school. In the Middle East, we have exams very early on, and contrary, I realize New Zealand doesn't, but based on my exam results, I was able to be moved up a year. So I skipped year seven, was here for half of year eight, basically. So essentially, I jumped pretty much straight into high school because year eight didn't teach me very much. It was a very short year that I was here for, and jumped straight into high school in year nine. It was a very big shift. Like I said, I struggled a lot. I really did. I was struggling to make friends. I struggled to be able to speak to people. I struggled to answer questions from teachers in the class. And I really, it's not an exaggeration when I say that I came home crying more days than I didn't because I was watching my self-esteem just crumble because like I said, was moved up a year and I was put in top stream in that year based on those grades that I had, which is bizarre when I think about it because I didn't speak the language very well and I don't know what they were thinking. But each time I sat a test, I moved down streams and I ended up in bottom stream in year nine. That was that crushed my mental health to go from top stream and then have to keep moving classes because I had to go lower and lower until I couldn't go any lower. It really humbled me. Or not even humbled me, it really just destroyed me because I didn't even have an ego at that time. And it took a long time for me to build that back up. I stayed home. I was isolated for most of the time outside of school, just sat at home all day, started to put on a lot of weight, just got into really unhealthy habits. And it's a sort of a perpetuating cycle because that unhealthy state kept me spiraling lower and lower. And I obviously needed to break that circuit, which we talked about previously with my high school teacher and all these experiences.
Yeah, and I asked that question there because New Zealand is a multicultural country, and we embrace that there. But what we don't, from my opinion, is we don't think about the challenges that migrants and children of migrants come with. So your parents make a decision for the betterment, and they have their struggles. But for a young person, especially if you don't speak the language, it's and I had him on the podcast, and I was speaking to her dad the other day, and her dad said to me he doesn't know if it was the right choice. Like, he said now that as adult children, they speak about the struggles they had, but as parents, they do the best that they can. And I wonder if there's another way for us in New Zealand to remember that when people come from different countries.
Yeah, I think it's very easy to blame people, point a finger and blame. And New Zealanders are very good at this. And it's not just New Zealanders as in like Kiwis, but people living in New Zealand. Even us immigrants judge each other, and it's
Yeah,
probably even worse amongst us. And I think it's just at the end of the day, I firmly believe that if I was put in somebody else's shoes, truly lived their experience up until the point they're at now, then I would be exactly where they are because it's all that experience that taught them everything they know and the decisions they make. It's all influenced by all of their past experience. It's very easy to sit here from my perspective. Yes, I had it hard in certain areas, but other people clearly had it harder because they still haven't been able to recover or build on themselves. And I think that the blaming culture that we have is just not the way to go about any of this. And it's just about constructive criticism if you want to give criticism, if people are open to it. And it's people shouldn't feel as though it's not an invitation to give criticism just because someone is struggling.
yeah,
And yeah, I think in terms of is there a way to remind ourselves of that? I think it's just an active reminder that you have to give yourself. And if you see someone going through something or not doing something as well as they could be, try to offer them help rather than judge them for where they are and what they're doing.
Yeah, and it's very like I said before. It's very easy for us to judge and to blame, but we don't know people's. Everyone's got a story. Like this is why we have this podcast because everyone has a story, and we don't know what the story is. And if we don't
Mm,
give people the chance to talk and listen, we will never know.
mm.
Um, Talking about your story again. So we're thinking about you, the quiet year 12, and you had a bit of a shift, and now you're there speaking. You're being invited to speak at University of Auckland events. How does that feel, and how did you get to that stage where you are now? MC, and you're talking at events that are basically you're talking to a room full of the wealthiest people in Auckland, New Zealand. Let's tell us about that part of your life.
Yeah, I think it still feels surreal to me sometimes. I've Some of the opportunities I've gotten to, like I said, speak to some of the wealthiest people in the countries and just some of the most successful people, and even just other students. Having an audience to speak to is just such a privilege, and I see it as such a blessing because it's a way. Even being on this podcast is the same thing. It's just a way for me to share my story and hope that someone can learn something or pick up something from it, or be inspired to support people going through similar stories. And it's something that I really enjoyed once I made that transformation in my life, because there were so many things that I picked up along the way that I wish I knew earlier. Because it doesn't matter when you make that transformation, doesn't matter how well of a transformation it is, you'll always wish, man, what if I did that another year earlier or 2 years earlier? And it's just realizing that there's no point reinventing the wheel. There are a lot of people who are going through the same things that I went through. There are still people coming from different parts of the world, third world countries, whatever you want to call it, war-torn countries, and they're having to figure out exactly the same blueprint that I figured out. So why not put myself out there, teach people something, or talk about my experience? And that's the way I started getting involved with speaking at events. And you speak at one event and you get invited to another, and it's sort of a cycle. And that's the same reason why I started posting on social media as well. And it was just trying to share my story and show people that it's possible.
Yeah, and what I've really enjoyed is it's the impact that it's had. I was saying to you just before that your growth has been so phenomenal to see, but not in the fact that it's been an ego-driven growth. It's the story, the passion that you bring, which, as you said before, it's there's a saying out there, learn the rules to break the rules. Like you've learned the rules about how to live your life, the blueprint, but now you put it out there and hey guys, this is my blueprint. You can take it or you can
Mm.
adapt it to your way because your way is your way.
Mm.
And I love to ask, as you've become more active on social media and you've gathered a following, what has that been like for you? And I asked this because one of my other guests said to me that it was like a curse and a blessing. You have all these people following you, and you're like, okay, what does it actually mean? So I'd love to know your thought on how you navigate that world as well.
Yeah, I think it has its pros and cons. I'm very fortunate that I've been posting on social media for just over 8 months now. And in that time, I've grown to 22,000 followers across platforms. And it's been like the other guest said, it's a blessing and a curse because you feel this pressure on everything you're doing. Yes, you share things that work, but you're also putting yourself out there to people that are receptive to that advice, but people who are also not receptive to it. You get a lot more criticism, and that criticism sticks with you. And it's not constructive criticism, it's just criticism for the sake of criticism. People want to tear each other down. If anyone sees you climbing or trying to share how you climb something, they'll try their best to pull you down. And that really gets to me on some days more than others. I know that there are a lot more people that find value in what I share, but it's the few that don't, that really make you question why you're doing all of this. Because I could just keep doing what I'm doing and not share anything and just do it because it's working for me. At the end of the day, I'm not on social media to for any other reason than share what I'm doing and inspire some people. And so I could just keep doing what I'm doing without sharing any of this. And that sort of gets to me in that sense because I'm investing a lot of time learning how to edit, how to take these how to angle all these shots and doing all these things and how to share the message in a way that is packaged in a manner that someone would consume. And pouring all that time into it just to get some people telling you, oh, this is cringe, or, why are you doing this? Or this is embarrassing. You should be ashamed of yourself or whatever. It makes you question why you do it all. But for me, it's the few people that message me saying this was really helpful, or I got this result after using your advice, or I did this. And it's the messages in your inbox that no one else sees except for you that
Yeah,
remind you of why you do all of this. Because the comments, the negative comments are public, everyone sees those. But the positive messages you get, it's just for you.
yeah. And that's the truth, right? It's again, it's that story, right? We all the world and our brains are just geared to see all the negative,
Mm.
and we don't see or hear about the positive. And the reason it's positive and you don't share it out there is because it's the impact that it's making. Conversely, you have people that will share, "Oh, this is what I got in my inbox," but that takes it away because now you're not doing it for that, but you're doing it for
Yeah,
a different reason.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I love that. And the other thing that I firmly believe in, it's in amongst 100 people, if there's one person's life that's changed, the other 99 who actually cares.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Yes. So I want to acknowledge you for that because I think it's really awesome. But you spoke about challenges and ups and downs. If you were to think about all the challenges you've had so far, what is one challenge that has been really really challenging for you, um, that has just gotten you to a place where you go, how do I get through this here? Because we all go through it in life at some point.
Great question. I think one challenge that I've always had is it's easy for me to talk about the new person I've become, but at the root of me, it's still the same person I always was. So the same fears, the same anxiety that I had many years ago, even when you met me, a lot of it has subsided, but the roots of it are still there, and those are the ones that get to you on certain days more than others. And one thing I've always had is a fear of judgment because I've always been I guess for often in my life, longer than my life than not, is someone who was getting judged for being overweight, someone who's getting judged for not speaking the language very well or being that foreign kid or for whatever reason. I always felt like I was casted out of certain groups and it's been the biggest challenge navigating the space where, like I said, I'm trying to speak at these different events and share my story and all these things, which might make it seem like all of that is gone. But before every event that I speak at, before any opportunity, even before this, I sort of always question, well, what do I have to share? It's your self-doubt can really get to you on certain days, and it doesn't matter how much you've done, because if you let those voices get to you, it can stop you from doing things. You can cancel on opportunities, you can not take offers that would really help you and accelerate your career. But for me, one way to overcome that, and I guess that might be your next question. One way I found it is I saw this quote where it said that the only way to overcome your self-doubt is to build a stack of undeniable evidence that you are who you say you are. And that always stuck with me because if I can have if I can see in myself where I've done well and achieved, then I can remind myself that actually I am where I'm supposed to be. And it doesn't matter who's judging me, who's seeing me the way they are, because I know who I am. And having that confidence in myself is the one thing that helped me overcome that.
And it's really really powerful. If we think about evidence, now I ask this in the nicest way possible because I think a lot of us even doubt the evidence. We
Yeah.
we see this and we go, no, that was a fluke, or that was lucky. And for those of you that have listened to my podcast before, I don't believe in luck. There's no such thing as luck. That's my own thought, and I'll explain why a bit later on. So how do you not doubt the evidence that you see in front of you?
Great point you make because for the longest time, I did doubt the evidence as well because I thought I got lucky. I saw every achievement that I had, whether it be getting into medical school, the grades I was getting, opportunities that I've gotten, scholarships, all of these things. For the longest time, up until maybe 3 years ago, I always thought I was getting lucky, and I always thought that the luck would run out at a certain point. But it was just when these opportunities kept coming, I realized without trying to be egotistical, but luck doesn't happen that many times in a row. You have to it's ridiculously low chance for you to get lucky that many times. If you think about each one is the equivalent of winning the lotto or even a much higher chance. But each time that compounds, that chance just gets significantly smaller.
Well,
And
yeah,
so I realized that chances are that it's not luck because if you can make all of this happen, then you're doing something right. And it's not to say that you're special or better than anyone else, but what you're doing is working. So it it does take an active reframe. I guess after a certain number of achievements, you start to think there's a pattern there, and it's not just I've gotten lucky every single time.
yeah, and if you want, if you, I'll talk about my luck as well. That I learned, I
Yeah.
heard this quote, and it's stuck in my head. There's four kinds of luck, and one of them is blind luck. This is the luck of where you're born, the parents that you're born to, which
Mm,
you have no control over. Right? That's just luck. That is pure luck.
absolutely.
Then the second kind of luck is the luck of awareness. So where you basically go out and you do things. So if you go out and you go for a walk, for example, let's just say you want a Porsche, for example. Let's say you want a Porsche. When you go out for a walk, you're going to start seeing this Porsche all the time. That's the awareness that you have because you're not in your bedroom anymore. And then there's a lack of opportunity. So now the fact that you're aware and somebody gives you an opportunity, like, hey, maybe a Porsche breaks down in front of you and someone goes, hey, do you want to do this here or do you win a prize? Because you've been out walking, lack of chance, lack of opportunity, you are now aware. And then the fourth one is the luck of your uniqueness. So each one of us has a skill, and how do we make that happen? Of the four lucks, only one of them is out of your control. The other three,
Mm.
you have the choice of leaving the bedroom. You have the choice of being aware. You have the choice of developing a skill. And when I heard that, that made me realize actually this is very true. We so often talk about I'm lucky, but actually, as you said, Bara, it's not about luck. It's you put yourself out there. You said yes to opportunities. You said no
Mm.
to different things, and but it's very hard for us to believe that because never taught to think that way. We're taught to think about things happen for a reason, and they do happen for a reason, but you make those reasons happen.
Mm. It's honestly a great way to look at it. And yeah, I mean, I think the blind luck also plays a lot more of a role than people realize. I think that's one way to stay humble is realize the significance of the parents you're born to, where you're born, the circumstances around you, and what you grew up, what you
Yeah,
grew up with. Because a lot of people will have, I don't want to say comfortable is a good word, but everyone has their challenges, regardless of what they grew up with, and it's all relative to their other experiences, of course. Just clarifying, but
yeah,
even if you compare two people and one of them had a much more comfortable lifestyle and they go on to achieve better, they will. It's very easy to attribute that to I'm great or I'm so much better than other people around me, but there are a lot more people who could have done just as well as me if they had the things that I had. And it's just
yeah.
realizing that I think I really agree with your point, and I think that even though blind luck is only one component, it also plays a huge role because whether you're born in New Zealand or you're born in a third world country, your life is going to
Yeah.
look very different.
100%, and that's the one that we forget about. That's the one that we don't realize that actually, as you said before, being born, even having a family, having two parents, that are there, just
Yeah,
those small things. Having grandparents sometimes just change the way
yeah.
things happen, and we don't think about that. Yes, and I love what you just said there, the word comfortable, because another great quote that I like to remind myself is the hardest thing you've faced is the hardest thing you've faced.
Mm,
So your hard and my hard are very different, but it doesn't negate the hardest thing.
yeah.
So the hardest thing you face is the hardest thing you face, and that makes it really, really real. Um, yeah, which always grounds me. It just grounds me in the world when we like to blame and think about different things. And Bara, now I'd love to flick back to your medical school experience. You're now in your fifth year, so you're obviously in electives and you're doing some practicums and you're in the hospitals. What has that been like? Now you're away from the textbooks and now actually seeing patients.
It makes it feel a lot more real once you're in the hospital because in preclinical years or the first few years of medical school where you're just going to lectures, sitting exams, you learn all of these conditions, you learn all these facts to perform better on an exam, and your performance is directly reflected by the score you get at the end of it. And you think that's all it is. And you step into the hospital and you keep seeing it that way initially because you think, oh, I'm seeing this patient so I can learn this fact so I can score better on my test. And that's the mindset you get stuck in initially. But then you quickly realize that actually I was sitting those tests and learning those facts for this patient in front of me. And that was a very big perspective shift for me because I started to realize that it's a very different it's two different things to perform well on tests and to be a good doctor. I think though that's something that every medical student, every doctor realizes is that the tests and exams will test you on the nichest facts and the smallest details that you might never even need to know. But being a good doctor will test you on everything else, your people skills. Yes, knowledge is important, but people skills, empathy, all of these different components of it, how you respond to adversity, how you respond in difficult situations with patients and things like that, that's going to matter more to the person in front of you, and that's going to matter more for your career long term. And yeah, I think that's something that I reflect on often now that I'm in the later stages of medical school. I realize how much different the you obviously mature as a student in those years as well, in terms of academics and how you view university and how you view tests and exams and yeah.
Yeah, and it's what a great perspective shift, right? And I think this is across every discipline, whether it's med school or law or whatever it is. At university you train to study to pass, but
Mm,
actually in the real world, it's not about whether you're a 90% student, 95% is can you do the job, and if in your world, are you going to be able to help the patient in front of you in that moment in time if they're
mm,
crying, or if they're afraid to see a doctor, if they're afraid of a needle. You can't be like, I got 95%, so therefore, oh damn, I can't even talk to you. So
yeah. Yeah.
yeah, it's pretty surreal. I've asked you about the challenges, but I'd love to flip the script and ask you what has been one of your highlights so far in your world. That you just that's a stand up moment for you, apart from getting to med school.
Yeah, yeah. I think that's the biggest one that really snowballed into other blessings. There are a lot that come to mind. I'm not just saying this because I'm on this podcast, but I think that I'm a very grateful. I try to be a very grateful person. I try to think of all the moments that I've gotten and all the blessings that I have, and always remember how fortunate I am to be where I am. And one of those um, things is people I'm around. I've tried to always pick my circle and be in the right circle, and I'm always grateful for the people I have around me because they push me to be as good as I am now and even better than where I am today. So people I've met in medical school, it really is just friends you'll have for life, and that's something I'm very grateful for. But also in terms of experiences, I 2 years ago I took a year off med school to do an honors research year, and I was fortunate to get the biggest scholarship, postgraduate scholarship in New Zealand tertiary education. And as part of that, there was a mentorship program. So I was already very happy with getting the scholarship, but there was also a mentorship program where you could pick any mentor in the country or just around New Zealand and ask them to be your mentor. And more often than not, because of the size of the scholarship, they'd say yes. So I picked Sir Ashley Bloomfield, and fortunately he accepted, and he was my mentor for a year. And that was something that I'm very grateful for because I learned so much from him. I learned so much about leadership, medicine, integrating those two. And yeah, I think I've always said that was going to be the highlight of med school for me. And that experience alone, being involved in that scholarship, got me the next opportunity, the biggest opportunity I had, which was speaking at the Chancellor's Dinner at the University of Auckland, because I got to reflect on that experience, share my story, share the lessons I learned from my mentor, and all of these things. It sort of was combining every blessing of my life was in that one event where I got to speak to some of the most successful people I've ever shared a room with. And yeah, so I think if I had to pick one moment, it would be the Chancellor's Dinner.
And this is awesome. And again, it's a culmination of things. And I'm going to go back just a little bit. Applying for that scholarship, did that come from you, or did somebody say, "Hey, Bara, you should apply for the scholarship"?
It didn't come from me. I definitely didn't because if you read about the scholarship, it's called the Coupe Leadership
Yep.
Scholarship. And if you read
Yep.
about it, it's all about excellence. It's all about being the best of the best in your field and all of these things. And I remember reading all of this, and I talked about this in my speech at the dinner. I read this and I was like, this is not me. Like I'm just, this guy from New Plymouth. And in that time, I really did believe I was lucky to be where I am. I had nothing, I hadn't earned it fully. And so I definitely wasn't in the headspace to think that this is something I'll go for. And it was this girl who I didn't know very well in medical school who told me, "Oh, if you're interested in doing a research year, you should apply for the scholarship." And this was 2 days before the deadline, and I thought, what is she even? She doesn't even know who I am. Like, what does she think that I am to be able to apply for this? But I applied anyways, and it was because of this person that I wasn't very close with, and just said you should do this. And yeah,
Isn't that crazy? I always ask this question of people that apply for these scholarships, and 99% of them will say they didn't even think about they didn't think they were good enough.
Mm.
Because we're own worst enemies, right? We just go, you read the application, go, oh, this is not me, and yeah,
I think that's so true. I think it's very easy to be in a mindset of praying for blessings, praying for more. And when you get these opportunities, you don't see that that's the blessing or the calling that you were praying for, and you turn it down. And
yeah,
so I highly recommend that everyone, whatever opportunity, whatever door is in front of you, try to open it, just apply, put your name forward because it can change your life.
yeah. And what's the worst that could happen? You gotta know.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah. I always tell people, I've been telling people lately, I was like, what's the worst that could happen? If you get a no, it doesn't change you from the day before.
Yeah,
But if you get a yes, it's going to change your life significantly.
yeah, absolutely. And you're the only person that will know about the no because
Yeah,
it's between you and the institution or you and the person.
yeah, totally. That's so true, and I love that for you. And I love that the highlight has been the opportunity that came up. Having a mentor, but the highlight was actually being able to share the story of your actual journey as a mentor. Sorry, as a mentee under Sir Ashley Bloomfield, which is pretty epic.
Mm.
And I'm sure you have some crazy stories, but we won't go into those there. Maybe on another time. But that's pretty cool. Bara, we've been chatting for almost 50 minutes or so, and I know you've had a pretty crazy day. But I guess before we end off the podcast, I'd love to. Is there anything that I haven't asked that you think would be great for our listeners to hear about in your life, or that you want to reflect on?
I think we touched on a lot of the important stuff in my life, like in terms of my upbringing and cultural switch, the transition from small town to big city, and all of the perspective I have on opportunities I get and all of these things. I guess, yeah, I think the one piece of advice that I could leave people with is to be grateful and count your blessings from where you are, but also not be scared to add more blessings to your life by taking the opportunities that come your way.
Yeah, and I think that's a really fantastic thing because we forget about that, right? We forget to give gratitude, but we also forget to see the things that are coming forward. And as you said before, life throws us opportunities. We pray, we pray, we pray, and then it comes, and you're like, okay, I'm not going to accept it. And you're like, well, why has nothing happened? Because you also have to
Yeah,
take ownership. You have to take ownership of a
yeah,
decision,
yeah,
which is
absolutely.
really. I want to ask one other question that
Yeah.
I'm really curious about is you're Palestinian. You live in New Zealand. In terms of your cultural identity, what is that like for you? And I ask this because I struggle with this a lot of the times because I was born in Zimbabwe. I look like I look ethnical Indian. I live in New Zealand. I'm like, what culture am I? And and I asked it because we obviously live in a world now where, for some crazy reason, this has become an important thing for people to discuss. What? How do you navigate that, or do you even not even think about it?
I don't think there's anyone that goes through that shift of changing your environment, your culture without thinking about it. And I think that the people who don't think about it are subconsciously affected by it. So I think everyone's affected by it. In my own lens, I've always tried to initially, and I think this is common amongst immigrants, is you try to run away from your own culture. You try to fit in with the new space. You try to talk like these people. You try to act like them, dress like them, do all these things. And you see your culture as a weakness because it's a minority. But it's only when you get older and I've heard this time and time again, I still do. It's you come back to your roots eventually because you realize that's where you're most comfortable. You realize that's where your strengths are. You realize that that's where that's everything you've learned growing up is within that group. And that's why I'm really happy to see that my good friend Iman has started, Khawat, the sisterhood network for ethnic women in New Zealand. And it's just something like that is so powerful because it really reminds you and brings you back to your root, which really it really reinforces all your strengths and your identity, and that having that confidence come from your culture and the validation can really help you transform the workspace you're in, the new society that you're in, and help you function at a higher level, is what I believe personally. So I think to summarize, there was a lot going back and forth, but really, I tried to run away from my own culture, and now I've realized the strengths and the beauty of it, and start to go back to it myself.
And I think that's true with any immigrant culture, but also any indigenous culture. And I'm saying this openly because I think this is what we have all been brainwashed, or the world has told us that, hey, this your cultural narrative is incorrect, or whatever the story is. And as
Mm.
you said, same thing with me. I ran away from it, and now and when you get older, you go, actually, wait a minute. Um, why did I run away from it? It's because I was trying
Yeah,
to fit into a world
yeah,
that is not my world.
yeah, yeah.
Yeah. And again, it's not easy, but when you have people like Iman, yourself, that are out there talking about it and just being active and saying, hey, embrace who you are, because it is, like you said before, it's where you feel the most comfort. In that comfort you grow, you bring out your strengths, and also in your development areas, so not weaknesses, you develop and you go, okay, this might not be all good, but how can I change for the next generation?
Mm.
Which is
You've got
which
a
is
lot of beautiful insights. You have a lot of great quotes. Someone needs to interview you on your own podcast. Wish we had a bit
One
more time to interview you, to be honest.
one day I'll be at TEDx Auckland maybe. Who knows?
Yeah.
No, beautiful. Bara, any last words? And you already took away my closing, but I'm going to do it anyway. Our podcast is called Baskets of Knowledge, and we love people to share a piece of knowledge. I know you've already shared one, but is there any other knowledge you'd like us to put into our basket of knowledge?
The first thing that comes to mind is to realize that it's never too late. It's never too late to change who you are, what you do, whether you're overweight, whether you're skinny, whether it's not about physical health, it's mental health. I think we often think about the evidence or the stack of evidence, like I said, that reminds us of who we are, and we just see it as that. And whether it be good evidence or bad evidence, we take it as that's what we are. But there's always room for growth. There's no reason why you can't start tomorrow on a new chapter, new page, and just build who you are from that day onwards. Doesn't matter how all the challenges, all the trauma you've been through, whatever it may be, you deserve to live a good life, and you should start your good life as soon as you can.
That is so so profound. That it's never too late to change. And I think about a lot of successful people. A lot of them were in the late 30s, late 40s, late 50s when they switched. And I love what you just said there. And this is something that I keep reminding people. You said every day is a new day, but also every step you take is the first step ever in that direction. We always talk about the first step, but every day that step that you made is the first step. Like this conversation, whatever it goes, is the first time we're doing it. And we have the choice of the step that we're going to be making or staying at. So I really, really love that. Thank you for that. That's a really beautiful share that, you know, it's never too late to change. Bara, like I said at the start, it is my absolute privilege to have you on. I mean, as you said before, we could be talking for hours and hours and hours, and maybe that'll happen one day. But thank you for
Yes.
sharing your evening. Thank you for sharing your thoughts. And I'm just gonna share something that it's for me as an outsider. I'm really proud of you. I mean, you might not know this there, but proud of you and also your family. I've had a close association with you and your sister, well, especially your sister, but you, and it's really, when I see you both, it's so awesome to see how successful you are, and I just want to share that from myself, that it's really really awesome, and also the work that you're doing out there, and it's an inspiration to anyone out there that is any doubt that goes, hey, we can't do it. I'm like, if this family can do it, then anyone should not have the excuse not to try. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Rajesh. That actually means a lot, and it's very heartwarming, especially coming from someone who I've known before all of this, before all the scholarships, the awards, and all of these things. You've known me from day one and now, and you still have always been the one of the most supportive people I have around me. So thank you.
That's that's my pleasure. It's my pleasure. For listeners out there, thank you for listening today. Hopefully you found something to take away. If you haven't found something, it's because you've fallen asleep. So go back and listen again, and feel free to share this with people out there because there's something for people to take away. So like we always say, don't forget to find a reason to smile. Don't forget to put something into your basket of knowledge. And like Bara said, don't ever think it's too late to change. So whatever you're waiting on today, make the change tomorrow and see what happens. Till next time, ka kite. Stay safe, everybody. Peace.
Thank you for listening to Baskets of Knowledge.
Yeah, we hope that you found something useful to put into your basket of knowledge. And as we said before, remember to put something little into your baskets of knowledge every week. And as always, feel free to like, comment, and share this podcast. Thanks, everybody. Bye.